زي البذور المنثورة في موسم الجفاف راد يسيول الشوق ترويها الذكريات حبيبي زي البذور المنثورة في موسم الجفاف راد يسيول الشوق ترويها مهما تحاول ما تنسى اللي لايق طريق الأبواب والقمر حامل بالأسرار زي الفايضة للأحباب.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Outernational podcast. I'm your host, Amrita Kadambi, and this is a podcast. Maybe you've listened to it before, maybe you're a new listener, but this is a podcast about music and liberation, if I were to put it really simply. And today we have an incredible guest here with us in the studio at Pioneer Works, live from Brooklyn, or not live, recorded from Brooklyn. And I have Alsarah, who is a singer, songwriter, producer, band leader, and somewhat reluctant ethnomusicologist, which I totally get. And if you want, we could get into it, or we can come up.
We'll totally gonna get into that.
Yeah. I have my own history with that, and it's like I was sort of forced into it, so I feel like I understand. But
Same. I was totally forced into it, and I was like, I didn't want this job.
Yeah.
But now it's my job. Anyways,
we study ourselves. That's what they sometimes make us do, right?
Yeah. Well, it's better than them studying us.
That's so true. It's so true.
That's sort of how I took it on as.
Yeah, to speak about oneself on your own terms is so important. And but yeah, it's so complicated. We could talk about it, but I guess in that way, maybe we'll start here, because I gave a little description of you, but I think it's so important for artists to describe in their own words their practice, especially because I would say it could be your artistic and social practice. So maybe that includes like how you think of yourself as an ethnomusicologist. But I know for so many artists, this changes literally in the moment. Like, you can tell me right now, on this day, in this moment, like in your own words, how would you describe your artistic and social practice?
Well, first of all, my artistic and social practice are fundamentally intertwined. Mm-hmm. I don't think art exists in a vacuum. It exists in the social world you live in.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's impossible for it to not have social connotations, political connotations, every kind of connotation, actually. It's a reflection of how you live. And that's why there is no such thing as standard or beautiful or normal. It's how real to yourself are you?
Yeah, I think you said in that Rolling Stone interview, I'm a political entity. The reason I'm here is because of politics. So this kind of like speaks to that. Like, if you consume me, you have to swallow that. And that is such a good like encapsulation, I feel like, of this idea of how linked these things are. You can't even possibly.
You can't even separate it. Like, for me, it's just like, it's wild that people, like, I've had situations where, like, I'm at the Frankfurt airport and
horrible airport.
The
Shout
worst,
out to Frankfurt,
the fucking worst
the
airport.
from
Fuck
hell.
you, Frankfurt Airport, on all bases.
I'll go on record.
On record, I'd like to go on and say that Frankfurt Airport might quite possibly be the most racist airport on the planet.
100%.
And I've flown through it a minimum of 10 times. Minimum.
Yeah, same.
To the point where now I'm just like, I actually deliberately avoid it.
Same.
It's just like you're going in there because, some people are inviting you so you can come and be their token refugee and sing about your experience. But then at the same time, you're being questioned at the airport if your passport's real.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And you have to come in and still smile and just land at soundcheck and be okay with it.
Wow.
And we're supposed to navigate that situation as artists in a way that makes the other people feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it takes a lot of grace to maintain that space. Let me just say that.
Yeah. I mean, especially.
And I don't always have that grace. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. No, and nor, I think like one of our first guests on the podcast was Angel Badaweed. I don't know if you know Angel's music, but she's this incredible musician, kind of in this lineage of Sun Ra in Chicago. And she's completely dropped this idea of making anyone feel comfortable. And it's pretty badass. It's very empowering to you just even bear witness to it. Like, we split a bill in Chicago, and I was just like watching her just be like, yeah, this is how it is. Like, you all know what you did. And if you didn't, like, just by my energy, you're going to know.
Exactly. And this is sort of where I'm at this point in my life, where I'm just like, I'm done pretending that anything about what's going on is okay.
Yeah, okay, or normal.
Or normal, or serving us. You guys are just serving yourselves.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'd like to really talk about that. Like, and I talk about that in my existence. I went into music because I thought it would be a space of liberation, a space where I can be free and safe. And capitalism went into it and did the same kind of violence that colonialism did to us.
Well, it's not possible to separate.
Exactly.
Those things,
you can't
right?
separate those things. So, and in a way, the way like the music industry has consumed me, and, it has been around that, it's always been walking around that violence. Mm-hmm. And as an artist who really try to walk, like, this is why I also call myself a reluctant ethnomusicologist, because it's like I had to come up against people who are like, Africa is like this and it's like this. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is traditional. I'm like, that's not traditional at all.
Yeah.
That's actually a form of pop from this place. No, this is this. And it's fine for all of us to have different understandings of things. It becomes an issue when it becomes systemic.
Yes. Yeah. My experience in ethnomusicology was that I actually had no background in it at all. And then I applied to PhD programs, and because there was no program that fit any of like the more hybrid, because I'm an artist scholar, I like, across disciplines, I applied to some randomly like ethnomusicology, and I got into Columbia, which I was like not expecting at all because I had no background in it. Didn't get into any composition programs, even though I've been writing music for 15 years.
They don't respect that.
The things that I thought I wasn't to the institution. And when I was there, it was really crazy because I actually submitted an application that was about doing research on like Don Cherry and Alice Coltrane and musicians, like Black American musicians who in like the late 60s and 70s started to explore, Eastern religious and philosophical practices, and how it was like this form of decolonizing. And this was the dissertation topic. And when I was there, everybody thought I was there to study Carnatic music, like Indian, South Indian music, and thought I was doing my field work in India. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it in LA because that's where Alice Coltrane's ashram was. And it was just like, I was like, I'm only an ethnomusicologist to you because that's what you think that I should be doing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that. It's like it's the remnant field of anthropology. Like you're really watching colonialism and the entire structure of the noble savage complex and unpacking it and watching a pushback to the institution about what it means to actually exist in a living culture. A lot of what I hate about ethnomusicology is that it treats culture like it's dead.
Yeah, it's like objectified, right?
Yes.
It's like the artifact, and it's stuck in time.
It's stuck in time,
frozen.
and it has to be pure, and you need to remove. I was like, nothing is pure. Nothing has never not been touched by anything else.
Yeah.
To assume that you want to isolate a thing without looking at the history of interaction it has had with everything else is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not how humanity works. That's not how anyone works. Try to do the same thing here. Try to do that in America. Let's see how that works.
And they try, and they are. They are doing that, and they're failing. They are, and I do believe that too, or at least on my more optimistic days, I really believe it. And of course, there are moments where I think, oh my God, like even if they take 20 steps forward and it takes them 6 steps back, they still made some steps forward, right? So it's
true.
scary.
And there's still some like research that gets put into it, and like hence why I don't give up on the science of it. There is a real science to it, and I do believe in that. But it has very, very racist roots.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's just like the basis of it. And the music industry is extremely racist. And that is just a fact.
Yeah.
And this is why I've always avoided getting too deep in and just being sort of on the outskirts and working around it, because it gets a little bit harrowing once you start to dive in.
Yeah.
As a commercial artist.
Yeah.
What's expected of you as a Black and brown person, and what's expected of you when, you know, you're really of a different place, and what's expected of you when you're actively doing music that's not from the West, but you refuse to center the West in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because even if you do music that is not from the West, the expectation in the industry is that you still center it there.
Yeah, it's always in relation to that. So that's like in ethnomusicology, that would be like, okay, the distinctions like musicology is like Western music and everything else is ethnic music, ethnomusicology. Or like in music industry terms, you'd have like, here's pop music and then here's world music, right? And so I think you've spoken a bit about this, but I guess how would you describe then your music, like in this sense of decentering Europe, of Europe not being the focal point at all of like from the inside? How would you describe it?
I always thought of my music as East African retropop.
Love it.
I mean, I was like, I grew up on like music of my region.
Yeah.
And this is the foundation, just like Mozart grew up on the music of his region, and that's his foundation.
Yeah.
And so did Miley Cyrus. Sure. And so did everybody. Like nobody that's how you learn music, you know?
Totally.
So I grew up on East African music, Sudanese music, Nubian music, Egyptian music, Ethiopian music, Kenyan music. This is the foundation of where I come from. And I grew up on the traditional stuff, but I'm not a traditional artist because I know a lot of phenomenal traditional artists.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes like even the association with that, I feel like I have to say like, okay, yeah, that influence is there, but I have to give it up for the people who really
actually
in this
do
tradition.
It. Right, who are actually in the game.
Yeah.
And so this is really where I have the hesitation, where I'm just like, yeah, I mean, yes, some parts of what I do are traditional, but whose music doesn't have that in a way.
And even traditional music is emergent and evolves and changes, and you know, like that's the real problem. The binary is inherently colonial, because if you can be a fixed object that doesn't evolve, you never change in time, only the colonizer is allowed to be modern. You stay in that primitive state, that state that is, you know, justifies occupation, justifies exploitation, colonization,
and justifies
enslavement.
not needing to understand you fully.
Yeah.
Like
dehumanized.
Yeah, exactly. Like then now I can think of you as something small and tiny, and I don't need to consume how you spill outside this box.
Yeah.
I don't need to deal with that. And I'm like, well, you do have to deal with that, actually. And you're going to choke a little bit. And you might like it.
You might like it. Some people like that.
Exactly. I was like, don't just, trust yourself.
You don't know what you're into till you try it, right?
Exactly.
Totally. So, yeah, like these foundations in East African music, I guess I would love to know more about how you got into music, just even as a young person, but then how you also started writing and, you know, doing your own kind of music and kind of coming into your sound.
I started writing when I was 16 years old, actually. I took a songwriting class.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I felt weird about it because I was just like, do Sudanese women write music?
Wow, yeah. You never saw like the example.
I didn't see anyone acknowledge it as a thing, but then I realized later on in my life that actually there's like a whole genre of Sudanese women who write music. There's a whole genre called Aghani al-Banat, women's music.
Wow.
And it's written by women and performed by women. And it's turned into a pop music now where men have moved into it and have like taken over. Before that, all of the other stuff in the past was just kind of considered anonymous.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, the woman who made it famous,
Right.
but we don't know who wrote it.
Yeah, let's keep that like question open in case it was
In
a
case
man.
any man
wants to claim credit.
Exactly. But since then, now that it's the most popular form of music, like in the past 15 years, men have moved into the genre fully as composers, writing their names on things,
Wow, yeah.
documenting things, and still looking down on these women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, in the beginning, I just didn't know if it was possible. But I remember wanting so badly to write. It was music for me was always like this private space.
Yeah.
You know, I moved around a lot in my childhood, and I had a lot of upheavals, and it was really important for me to have my time with my music and with my books. So I spent a lot of time alone.
Music and your books are home then, like that is like stable in a way that you have some agency over. And yeah.
Exactly. And I had this big collection, and then when we moved to the States, it was very abrupt.
What year was that? I mean, we'll ground the listeners a little bit in some history at some point.
So
but
I
for
moved to the
yeah.
States in 94. And at that point I was 12 years old. And I had to leave my entire music and book collection behind. And so I arrived here and I felt naked and alone.
That was in Yemen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in Yemen. In 94, there was a brief war that broke out in Yemen, and we basically got deported. We had to leave. We got evacuated. And it was unexpected, our arrival here. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And the process of really like becoming like we none of us expected to stay in America. We just
It felt like it was going to be temporary.
totally. And so we had like literally a bag packed downstairs for like 17 years.
Wow.
It was, like it was not expected. And it was an interesting refugee immigrant conversation, and between us as a family and between yourself, as a person. And it kind of really got triggered again, obviously, in the last couple of years with what's going on in Sudan, knowing there's really no way back. But we arrived here, and I lost my entire collection of music and of books, and I couldn't describe to people what home sounded like. Because at that point, nobody knew where Sudan even was.
Yeah, or maybe the only images like of the suffering, of the genocide, of if even that,
not even that. They didn't even know where the hell it was. Like they were just like, where, what?
Yeah.
And so it was trying to describe that again, and then describing it to myself again, and then describing to myself also the fact that I, in Sudan, was a child of, I'm Nubian. I'm from a different, not from a mainstream tribe. My proximity to Arabness is a privilege within itself, the way I look in Sudan. But I'm Nubian, and my family moved to Sudan after, in the late 50s. From Egypt. We were between Egypt and Sudan because Nubia straddles the line. So we were between the two the whole time until then. And then we moved to Sudan in the late 50s. This is all related to the high dam being built. It's a whole other conversation. And, I was born in Sudan. I was raised in Sudan. And I didn't really deal with the fact that my family home was a mixed culture home.
Yeah, so to describe this a little bit, maybe to the listeners, or at least, I mean, you can definitely elaborate on this, but there's maybe a kind of a Black Arab sort of perceived or maybe problematic dichotomy that's sometimes created in the East African cultures. Would you say that's somewhat?
Totally. There is a Black versus Arab dichotomy that's created. There's a tension. There is a lot of racism, the colorism, classism, and there's also a lot of, subversion and people doing things, So it's just But when you're in it, there's also a huge movement towards nationalization and streamlining.
Yeah.
That was taking place in the 70s.
To homogenize, say this is what
Exactly.
the national
don't,
culture is.
like my grandfather refused for any of us to learn Nubian. So for me, learning Nubian, like learning to sing in Nubian was a reclamation act because he wanted us to assimilate fully. He didn't want us to have an accent like he did and people to know immediately that we were not Arab. So we would have a chance. And it's an interesting choice. Not one I would make.
But it's a common choice. And I mean, even if, in the United States, like many immigrant cultures, like I grew up in California, and so many, especially my Chicano and Chicana friends, like the idea of like speaking Spanish in the home in their generation was like, no, you don't. And now they're all like, oh God, we don't know Spanish. Like and that's complicated in another way because it is another colonizer's language.
Exactly. And so it's just like, at least I know Arabic.
Yeah. We have something.
Which is still a violent colonizer language within itself. But like, for me, it was, leaving Sudan and coming to the States actually was my outsider. Like I call it the insider-outsider perspective, where you really, like, as an insider, get to step out and look at yourself because you have to now describe who you are.
Right. Yeah. We're not talking about one identity or two identities or even three identities or four. We're like for me, this idea of third space, even though it's like has third in it, it's really about that multitude of space. And so I guess I'm interested, like, how did you, especially as you started writing music, start to find that space of all of these identities of Nubian, of like this East African sound of, then you're in America, you've lived in Yemen, and and I'm sure you could probably also speak to your influences. I'm sure those are like bringing in all kinds of different sounds. Like, how did you start to find your voice, and did that actually shape like how you were self-identifying, like in this country, especially when you're having to describe or you're having to sort of like perform, or like you've not even perform on stage, but just like in your classroom and middle school or whatever, just as like being a person you're performing. Like, was music helping you sort of understand your identity?
100%.
Yeah,
it was helping me so hard because I didn't know what was happening. Because we didn't, at the time, have really the language. There was a lot of denial in the Sudanese community and a lot of lack of information and gatekeeping about information, which I did a lot of digging through, about what our identity is. So there's a lot of like just weird navigating and people just gaslighting you, actually.
You mean within the community itself?
Absolutely. Because people are gaslighting themselves about who they are.
Exactly, yeah.
So like...
It's so true.
So of course they're going to be like, no, you're wrong. And you're just like, but facts.
Yeah. No, trust me, the Desi community is a whole mess. So
so it's just like... It was a lot of that, but also for me, like, honestly, finding, like, learning about the African American community and culture, the Caribbean community and culture, the caste system in the Caribbean community and in the South of America were so similar to what was happening in Sudan.
Interesting. And some of that has roots in India because it came to the Caribbean also but then don't you think the British also probably had a role?
I totally believe the British are responsible. I just like to pin it. I feel like they're not blamed enough.
I blame them as much as I possibly can.
I just want to blame them harder. I don't know what it is. Anyways, but yes, it was a lot of like navigating that and listening to these songs of diaspora in a way, of loss, of looking for home, of trying to figure out who you are, of the colorism, of the disparity and the violence inside the home that is masked as love and survival.
Yeah, it's reproduced like the colonial violence gets reproduced in the home so much, and especially through like a patriarchal kind of figure and all it's
and watch, just, it was really enlightening. And then researching and digging deep into the Nubian songs of return, which are basically songs about like the loss of home, a home that can never be rebuilt, and it will never be the same, and you will never be the same, and you can never go back. So what is this space you're writing about?
Yeah, Stuart Hall has this, I mean, the Jamaican, you could say post-colonial theorist, philosopher, about how diaspora is a loss. Like he says this in an interview. And it always like, whenever I heard that, it's there's pain there just inherently, and it's not that there's not very interesting and amazing things that are a byproduct of diaspora identity, right? But just that, like almost just sitting with that in itself, and that just being, it is a loss. It is a loss, you know.
It's about living in grief in a weird eternal way. But for me, I also think of it as a gift. It's a gift beyond any other gift. It's a gift when you first get it. You don't know if you want it. But it's a great gift.
Yeah.
Because it connected me to my Nubian heritage and our story of loss there. It connected me to stories of loss in the Caribbean, stories of loss in America, stories of loss across the world. I became obsessed with folk music across the world, Balkan music, Georgian music, Aboriginal music, any kind of music that was trying to document its people. And the things that always struck me the hardest were the stories that were talking about loss. And there's a lot of people talking about loss.
Yeah. And that's like, it's a form of solidarity too, to I think it's at some point I was reading, you were saying that part of also your solidarity with the Palestinian people isn't even with this sort of kind of problematic things of like Arab versus Black and all of these kinds of things of like, can we as Sudanese people be in solidarity with Palestinians, especially at a time when there's like this idea of like crises competing for our attention of which is the bigger genocide or the bigger, where you were saying, well, the displacement, this idea of displacement, of dispossession, like this is one of the things that I think, if I'm interpreting correctly, of like the solidarity that you feel with Palestinian people. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going through a similar thing. And in the next couple of generations, we're going to reproduce culture that looks familiar because we're going through a similar crisis. And so we are coming together. This tree is coming together. And I genuinely believe that the diaspora is giving us another form of togetherness to compensate for the loss.
That's actually, for me, a very healing way to think of this, because it is a gift in so many ways. Like I think about, I've been in New York for 17 years, and I mean, my music would not be remotely what it is without the encounter with so many different people with different stories. And I mean, it is such a gift, and it's happening in the heart of empire, and there's such a tension there. But I think like leaning into that, it is really healing to think of it as like it's producing this other thing that, the circumstances are what they are, why we're here, and continue to worsen in so many ways. But this is where we have our strength, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is exactly where we have our strength. And I'm forever grateful for that. And this is why for me at this point, I'm just like, my conversation as a Sudanese person with the world is as a diasporic being. And it's about connecting with everyone.
Yeah.
And because I've realized that this is the gift my neighbors have given me, from the different kinds of foods to the different kinds of stories, the different kinds of songs, the hugs, the love, the care.
Yeah.
The ways to navigate a city you don't know.
Yeah.
I've been here for 21 years. Like,
wow.
I'm a New Yorker.
That's how I feel too.
I'm like, I'm sorry, I haven't lived anywhere else that long.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I mean, I think for me as a diaspora person, I was born in Buffalo, New York, of all places. My parents came from South India to Buffalo, which could not be more different in climate or vibe or anything.
When did you come?
My parents came in like 82, 83. They came a year apart.
Oh, that
I
was the
born
tech boom in Buffalo.
Not remotely yet. No, like that was 82, and then 85 is when I was born. Buffalo is was a kind of rust belt, almost like Midwestern, but it's Western New York. And it was like industrial factory kind of town.
I thought the BMI factories were there, or is that lower than there?
I think maybe much later, but then I went to the Silicon Valley, which then in the 90s became like the real tech boom. You know?
Yeah. I meant like because BMI like opened a bunch of factories.
Okay, maybe I don't really know that history actually.
Upstate New York got destroyed by BMI.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So I actually don't know that history, so I
We'll
will
talk about it
ask
later.
you about that later. But for me, as whatever first generation diaspora person, I think encountering and really resonating with Black American culture and learning in the very cursory kind of ridiculous ways that we learn about the enslavement of African peoples in the United States and the genocide of indigenous people. I mean, I really didn't learn that much in school, or it was contextualized in a very particular way. But through culture, like through especially West Coast hip hop for me and R&B, because that's where I was in the Bay Area. Like that's what I was really encountering. That for me, like even if it wasn't the diaspora in the way that our diaspora, it's a different, there was still a choice to come here by my parents, right? That is a very different way to arrive in the United States. But for me, it was like Black American culture is American culture. I never like really thought of it any other way.
Totally. Yeah.
But that was like the way to understand otherness and being, trying to be like, who are we, especially in this dynamic of like white American heteronormative patriarchal hegemony, although I didn't have any of these words obviously when I was young, but seeing that through the eyes of Lauryn Hill, seeing that through the eyes of someone like Tupac, and getting these little seeds of revolutionary ideas. But yeah, I'm curious. Oh, I just realized my phone is transcribing everything I'm saying.
That's good, no?
Yeah, maybe. Although I'm like Google worries me. I only use Google Docs. I'm off Google and everything else, so I need to figure out. I need to get off completely. But I think I'm curious also for you in terms of maybe it's also through a similar thing in navigating American culture, but in general, like what was there music that really expanded your consciousness, whether it was politically or even like sonically, or just in terms of what was possible musically, and maybe even how music can operate in a social and political way?
Oh God, there's so much.
There's so much, right?
Yeah, I was like, God, this is a really hard question.
Or even maybe if you remember, like if there was something early on that was like, oh.
Well, Nina Simone was the first one to like break my head open.
Same.
Like I was
the
14.
model for everything.
I was 14 and I was just like, what just happened to me?
Yeah.
But there's so much. For me, it really was like yeah, I don't know. This list is really long. Like that's a high pressure question.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I'm sure we'll come to it. We'll come to it throughout.
But yeah, we'll come to it throughout. But like Nina, like took it out off the gates. That was me. But like for me, it was also like other artists from Sudan that also blew my mind open. But also other artists from like Zanzibar, like Biku Dude blew my mind open. She was this old lady who made her first album when she was like 89 and had been singing since she was 16 and ran away from home to do it around the world.
Wow.
It's just, and Grace Jones blew my mind.
Yeah.
Prince blew my mind. Kulthum blew my mind. Fairuz blew my mind.
Yeah.
Asmahan blew my mind. The list goes on and on.
We'll make a playlist.
Yeah, we'll make I would rather make a playlist, actually.
Yeah.
I was like, I think that would be easier because it was like, there was so many women. And like Samira Dunya. Oh my God, I can't forget Samira Dunya. She changed me.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to actually make a playlist because a lot of these names are familiar to me, but a lot of them aren't. So
yeah,
I'm
no,
excited
these were people who were like really taught me what it means to code yourself in music. That was the thing I was searching for as a teenager and as a 20-year-old, as I was getting into my music writing. How do you code home? What does that mean? Especially as someone who was a diasporic child who loved the sounds of their home but did not see themselves in it. Because that's why I started writing, actually. Not because I thought I was like the best musician. I am great though.
It's true.
Sorry.
The podcast will be sandwiched with your sound, so the audience will know what we mean.
Just kidding. I've been told I need to pat myself more.
You do, of course.
But I didn't start writing, honestly, because I thought I was great at it. In fact, I had a real anxiety issue about getting even on stage. It took me many years to be able to perform correctly, or whatever that means. But it was about, how do I code home when I am not reflected in home's sound? I love the sound of home that I came from. But even the sounds of home that were recorded weren't really reflecting everybody at home. And that's something, as I continue to research more, work on different things.
What part of you did you feel was it you mean the Nubian part, or what was not reflected, I guess, in the sound?
It's a really good question. It was partly the Nubian part, partly the part that looked like it has its feet in different places. And the story of how I arrived here, it was me. I wasn't there. Me.
Yeah, I think in that interview with Rolling Stone, you said your target audience in the beginning was you. That is I think maybe we're all doing that to some extent without realizing it, but I think that naming that is actually really important and powerful. Nobody's making music for me. I at least, it's like parenting your inner child or something.
No, it really was exactly that. I was just I was parenting the wound of being here for so many years without my collection of music, without any access really to our sound, and trying to recreate that and rebuild that, and then snatching at any sounds that were available. But then my larger community was stuck in a different space of nostalgia that also didn't reflect my space of nostalgia. The older folks had their own thing. And then also learning the history and the politics. And once I started learning about way more Sudanese music, realizing that most of Sudanese people's stories are not reflected in the sounds that are out there.
Yeah.
And that actually was heartwarming for me.
Yeah.
But knowing that, it just makes you realize that, no, actually, I'm going to go out there and just do it. And everyone was just like, no, you need to let somebody else write for you. That's the way we do it. Somebody writes, somebody arranges, somebody produces, and then you just sit pretty and sing.
And where did that all come from? Where did that whole hierarchy originate?
It originated in 1956 with the creation of the Sudani Standard Sound.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Where they were trying to become orchestras and things that sounded like the Arab national sounds out there, and have orchestras that reflected that same kind of thing.
So national, in that production of national
identity.
And so this would also be kind of in the part of, this happens in so many places of the nationalist identity is kind of forming in the face of the colonial occupation. Then you become a nation, and then in this nation building you have to have a national identity, and then you have to start collapsing all of the various identities. So in India, we see this, like, it's the same colonizer, the British, right? Like, they stoke a lot of division, and then they leave everything in shambles, and then you're meant to try to figure out, like, who are we as a nation, and that has its own violence to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that has its own violence. Who do you choose to erase in creating a national identity?
Yeah, I mean, drawing a border is violent. Creating a national identity, like the nation state, is just inherently genocidal and violent.
As a concept,
Yeah.
I agree. That's why I was like, for me at this point, I move in a way where I'm like, I'm not willing to deal with the concept of a nation state. I think we have tried this out and it's not working. And we need to stop treating it like it's some sacred, natural thing that started.
It's so not natural.
I was like, this was created in a meeting in like 1853 in Berlin. Like, let's just let it go.
And that's what you're saying, like the gift of diaspora is maybe in living that and really understanding that, like, in an embodied way. Like, we get it, you know, like, we really get it. And yeah, so there's a bit of that tension of, like, I think you talk about this a little bit of, like, of maybe being a little weary about the nostalgia for homeland or in a certain way, or just being kind of like critical of that or understanding it in a more, I don't know. And you have many ways of kind of relating to the idea of homeland, I guess.
Totally. And also, like, you know, after the war reached Khartoum, and I say reached Khartoum because it's been going on for a long time. After it reached Khartoum and everything really like completely imploded, and I watched the way the world was, you know, a lot of these power players are responsible for what's happening. This is a proxy war.
Yeah.
But to also watch my people still implode on themselves with it and continue to do it was really painful.
Yeah.
And it also made me realize the dangers of nostalgia. Nostalgia is like the heroin of emotions.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful.
It's so powerful. And all you want to do is just do more of it and stay harder and deeper in it. And once you find people that want to be there with you, you know, you want to just go in there and create a little crack house together.
That's Make America Great Again.
Hey.
that's it's that drug. It's that nostalgia drug of, I guess,
100%.
post-war, like 1950s, whatever, white people were like, yeah, we're killing it. Like, you know.
Exactly. And I'm watching my people also, like, you know, being like, let's just, whatever it takes, go back to the way things were. Where I was like, the way things were killing us. And your nostalgia right now is you're trying to go back to that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a painful conversation to have with someone who's already in clearly a lot of pain.
I know. I mean,
But,
I'm
you
having
know-
this conversation with a lot of Iranian friends. I mean, there's so many ways in which this unfolds and in such painful ways. And like it's because especially of the history of colonialism and imperialism, it's like they really made it impossible to have a relationship with your culture, your homeland, and how power unfolds in the aftermath of the wounds they have inflicted. It does create such not just complication, but I mean, I think this might be, you know, part of what we're trying to do. What I'm hoping to do in talking about these things is bring some awareness to people of things that are going on. You kind of have alluded to what's happening now, and just to ground listeners in a little bit of context. Like, I'm no expert. I mentioned, like, I was a peace and conflict studies minor in college, and I had the great honor as a young person of encountering the Sudanese scholar Joachim Jock. And it was basically almost like a one-on-one independent study, because I think I was like one of two people doing this minor. It was brand new. It was like the first year that I came to college. So I got a little bit of context, but to talk just a little bit about the modern history of Sudan. We have, like, you know, very cursory history. You know, the British were forced out in 1952, kind of simultaneous with the Egyptian Revolution. And correct me anywhere if there's something missing, or if this, we're not going to go through everything, but the what we get, if we get any information in the West, like from Western media and institutions which we know have their own agenda, is a lot of messaging about the civil wars and conflicts in across the African continent, by that there are religious divisions, there are social factions, there are all these different things. We could talk about how those things have been exacerbated by the colonial powers, but that one split that's important to understand is South Sudan getting independence in 2011, right?
Mm-hmm. It's very important.
Very important. And then the military dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir is like from 1989 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have, this is so cursory, but like I do think it's so important because we just do not get any of this. So if I can get it to someone by the back door of music, like we're going to do a little bit of that. So how I came into my consciousness around Sudan was right around the time of the beginning of the Darfur genocide, was when I started college, was in 2003. So this conflict, this is something that I learned when I was in college, and I don't think we even used the words climate change yet in 2003. Maybe we were still talking about global warming, but that it was so 2003 to roughly 2020. How I learned about it was this is one of the first kind of conflicts that was really driven by the land and water resource, kind of one of the first climate change conflicts, or genocides, right? And there was some accountability through the ICC. Not really. Yeah.
No.
See,
No, I don't. There was zero.
No, zero. So we're gonna say zero. Yeah.
Like there was some talk. A case was raised. People went. No one got punished for anything.
Yeah. Which
Period.
we see over and over and over again.
Like, with all due respect, the ICC is a fucking joke.
Yeah, no respect at this point. At this point, what can we say about any of these institutions? Like, I try not to date these episodes too much because things are changing on such a insane like acceleration. But we can see right now how useless these institutions are in so many ways, and so it's very and if there is even like the performance of accountability, it's only within the global south. Like it will never be a perpetrator from anywhere else that is ever even performatively brought to the ICC.
Exactly. And it's just like, if they're like, you have to agree to our power in order for us to punish you. I'm like, who the hell says that yes to that?
Yeah.
Who's actually being charged?
Yeah.
Are you joking right now?
Yeah.
The way this whole thing is structured was weird to me. I'm like, how?
It was made by colonizers. It was made to protect
and it was just
them.
like, we're going to pretend that we are mad at you.
Yeah.
And then we're going to use it as a reason to maybe invade you.
Yeah. And all the meantime, making backdoor deals, making,
Exactly. And honestly, nothing gets whatever. All these people ended up really protected, very safe, and richer than before they got judged.
Okay. Thank you for that, because that's very good to know and understand. But sort of where we are today, I guess, it's 2019, they have the coup of Bashir. And from roughly 2023, and this gets very lost because of how many things also happen in 2023, which really feels like 2023 feels like such a marker in time of like a before and after, almost similar to the pandemic or something.
It's like a World War III moment.
Yeah.
Even though it feels like World War III started before that, this one, April 2023 feels like the real beginning.
Yeah, this is like the world is never going to be the same after this. So the start of what, some people call the third civil war. I mean, there's been multiple kind of moments throughout the history of modern Sudan, but between the RSF and Sudanese armed forces. But I think what you're alluding to is the proxy, one of the proxies being the UAE, which is Western ally, arming the RSF. And obviously
extracting a tremendous amount of raw material from Sudan right now.
Absolutely. Minerals, gold,
gas, Also agriculture. You know, like a lot of this is also bringing it back to climate change. The UAE, Saudi, Bahrain and Qatar, there's a lot of places that don't have enough agricultural space. And they made deals before that with SAF and with Bashir. So like they own almost 90% of our agricultural land. Access to it.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that creates an internal issue
Already
of
within
course.
it. Exactly. Where they're like, we're not walking away from our investments. That's their line. Their official line is, we're not walking away from our investments. We have over $30 trillion invested in Sudan.
Wow.
And SAF has other investors behind them, like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, like Russia, like
the Gulf states, the
Yes.
petro states.
Exactly. I was like, there's so many people involved in getting filthy rich from this war. And no one cares if all the black people on the ground die.
Yeah.
And
I mean, and this is, and we really don't talk about it enough, but the largest displacement of people in modern history, we're talking like over 12 million people displaced.
exactly. I was like, this has shifted the entire structure of our nation permanently.
Yeah.
Permanently. There is no returning from this moment of time.
And there's so little media. I mean, the more recent massacre in Al-Fashir, of like seeing that there were aerial images because it's impossible to see what's going on the ground. That you could see blood from aerial images, like this volume of massacre,
killing 2,000 people in one day.
Yeah.
Like the level of violence that has been taking place in Sudan over the last 3 years, the way it's normalized has really shook me to my core. I this was the moment where I finally couldn't deny that the world doesn't think of us as equal.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter how hard we work, how hard we try. My life will never matter the same way. It just will never matter the same way. And our nation will never recover from this. This wound is too deep. We have cut ourselves too deep. And this kind of thing, it's really brought the sense of urgency in my heart towards moving back towards actual ethnomusicology. Because I'm like, we now need to preserve ourselves, our archives, our sound archives.
Of what is left.
Who are we? We lost even the little data we had, which was already racist data, by the way. But the little data we had has been burned, has been bombed. And the things we have are left up to whatever person's idea is of what it means to be Sudanese. We don't have a real archive.
Yeah. And nothing is by mistake, right? Of like how and what it gets destroyed. I mean, we can see.
I mean, this was like the entire radio stations got bombed. The TV stations got bombed. So anything that was stored in there was destroyed.
Yeah.
Our museums were bombed. We don't have a living archive anymore.
Yeah.
Our things are being looted. Like the amount of things that are on the black market from Sudanese old museums, like pieces from thousands of years ago.
Really?
Oh yeah, just being stolen and thrown around and sold everywhere. You can find them on eBay.
You're the living archive. You're a living archive, a part
Exactly.
of a living archive.
So we have to start treating each other as living archives. And how do we move back towards that? So I reluctantly have become an ethnomusicologist.
There's the reluctance, but in that sense, yeah, it's like it's a sacred role, you know. Like there's this word ethnomusicologist. Maybe there's another word we can make for you, like because it is so important to be able to do that for yourself and for your people and you know it's something that it's heartbreaking to hear and to think like. that it's irreparable, and it's like that it's not. I think what I was trying to allude to earlier, saying like this is like Western institutions and Western media talk about these as internal conflicts solely, right? Of saying, oh yeah, it's a civil war. And yeah, of course there are religious divisions, ethnic divisions, those things exist. But how did they get exacerbated? I imagine the British, like they did in India with the caste system, which existed before, but existed almost more of like an observation of how societies are, got codified because they do divide and rule. They did it in Ireland with the Catholics and the Protestants. I'm sure they did it there. And on top of that, the sanctions, and I think
sanctions are crazy.
This is all kinds of Western sanctions, the British, the Americans, of what sanctions do to people and the economic situations within the country. And we see this very obviously in Iran, very obviously in Venezuela, very obviously in Cuba, right? And I'm sure, that the kind of pressure and the kind of instability that creates in a place. And if anyone hasn't read Walter Rodney's writing on how Europe underdeveloped Africa, I think it's so important because I think if we think like, oh yeah, these places, they're just violent like that. They just fight all the time,
I'm like, then why do you keep coming over and taking our stuff?
Yeah. And then when you take the stuff and you pull the resources out, and then those resources are not there for the people who they should belong to, then of course there is going to be instability and power struggle. Of course. What else can happen?
The revolution in Sudan was successful. It was happening and going well. The U.S. literally came in and had an intervention
in 2019. You
yes.
mean? Okay, yeah. I was
so
like,
I'm just saying, like these, and they tried to mitigate the peace deal between South Sudan and North Sudan. Every time they come in, everything goes to shit, and I don't think that's a real accident. Also, sanctions. Sudan has been under sanctions my entire adult life.
Yeah.
Actually, and childhood.
Yeah.
And it has destroyed our country. I tried to apply for a grant to do the work about, collecting this data, building some recording studios in certain regions to be able to do this and leave it for people there. I didn't qualify because Sudan is a problematic space.
Wow.
So...
problematic. Why? Why did that happen?
Well, it was under sanctions.
Yeah.
And it's going to be under sanctions again, and we don't know. And
Yeah. Yeah. So 2019, I think that same interview that I read, you talk about it as being a rupture. And yeah, that there was this possibility of revolution. Then you have the pandemic, and this is kind of around the time that you're working on Seasons of Road.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me a bit about that moment and how this album kind of came into being, in that period?
It was really like a reaction album. It started with the track Man'ana, where Man'ana I needed to make that song. And I went to Sudan and filmed the music video there. And it was an all Sudani production.
Wow.
And it happened there right away. It was the first track, and I was trying to push to complete the rest of the album.
And this is with your band, the Nubatones?
Yeah, with my band Alsarah and the Nubatones, yeah. And that was in 2019. And we started with Man'ana. We had laid down the seeds for the whole album. I was coming back to New York to work on it in 2020 after we shot the video for Man'ana. And COVID happened. And it just felt like the world ended.
It did, in a way. Yeah.
It felt like the world ended, the music industry ended, everything ended, and I just kind of paused. And it was at the time it didn't seem like it was a good pause, but it was a good pause. I needed to stop and really reassess the scene. What is it we want? What is it we need? What are we doing? If the world ends, are we happy with where we are?
And I think for some of us, that pause is not going to happen unless it's forced.
Totally. And I was definitely one of those people.
I would not have paused.
I would have never paused willingly. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I needed the world to sit me down.
Yeah.
And be like, you need to sit down and take a look at your life.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, at that point, I had been going and going and going. I'd been on back-to-back tours and making music, and it's wonderful. But, you know, the music industry is, like we said, a violent and colonial space. And, you know, I drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
I did. I drank the Kool-Aid. I was in it. I was trying to win it. Mm-hmm. And then I was just like, I hate this.
Yeah. They make you think you can win. Then they put you in competition with other people.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden you start to become the kind of person that's like using a scarcity mentality when they're approaching people. And that's not how I want to be. I don't know about other people, but that is not the vibe in my life. I was just like, I don't care what goes on, but I always want to operate from a space of abundance.
Yeah.
And that's my life motto. And the music industry actively tries to kill that inside of you.
Yeah.
And I'm not playing that game.
Yeah.
And I needed a moment, though, to pull back.
Yeah, when you're in the machine, it's very hard.
Yeah, you're just like, no, gotta keep going. Next tour, do this. I'm like, nope. Let's step back. Pause, read, lay down, think. And then the war in Sudan happened, so I just really needed to pause and think. So it was a lot of things back to back. And that's how the album got finished, in spaces of pausing.
Yeah.
On the road.
Seasons of road. Yeah, and in this album there's some English language tracks, was this a more recent thing? Or?
Yeah, it's a brand new thing.
What was that decision, I guess? Like, so before, primarily, were you writing in Arabic, and you also had written some things in Nubian? Is that right?
I never wrote anything in Nubian. I learned how to sing in Nubian.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to include like English again, this like fraught kind of space of language that we have in common for violent reasons. But what was that decision for you?
It was about allowing myself the freedom to write in any way I wanted to write. Mm-hmm. Because part of the music industry also was like, so back in the day, a music secret. Before I wrote I worked on the first Nubatones album, I wrote an entire album in English and recorded it.
Interesting.
And mixed it. And never released it.
Interesting. So it will be like released like when on your greatest hits, like
I was like back in that day.
Yeah.
I never released it because I was just like, at that point in time, everyone was just like, don't be stupid, don't write in Arabic, don't release like that, make music in English. You live in New York, you live in America. And who the hell is going to listen to your music? And I was just like, I don't know, the 30 people at the bar I sing at.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you're your own target audience after all.
I was just like, I'm cool. Like, we could do this in my bedroom.
Yeah.
But I thought about it after I finished it, and I was just like, do I want to be someone who's known as an American artist who tried to sing in Arabic and tried to be Sudanese? Or am I going to be a Sudanese artist that sang after that in English?
Yeah.
I didn't, and it wasn't easy. Yes, I wanted to be a Sudanese artist. I wanted to establish myself like that. And I knew Sudanese people would resist me because I was making things that didn't necessarily sound cohesive to what was happening at the time. And that's fine. But I was determined to do that for me and my way. And there was a lot of people, it turns out, that were, echoing that same tension that I was feeling in other diasporas. Like, my favorite thing about my audience is how mixed it is, but how fundamentally immigrant it is. Mm-hmm. And I really love that.
That's that diaspora connection across so many people.
Yeah, there is that feel right there. It's always there. And we get each other across languages. And then after a while, it became unexpected for me to sing in English. So I kind of resisted for a second. And then I was like, girl, what are you doing? Are you censoring yourself? Not on my watch.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like you do, like, you grow up here, you do express yourself in English. There is
I speak in English all the time.
Yeah, there's a way in which you have a personality in this language that maybe is different in some ways, or just has a different tone to it. But yeah, it's interesting, like this idea of especially with pop music of language, and of course, like all of us all over the world have been listening to English language pop forever, and nobody like ever questions the idea of that. Like I know people, like my family members in India who didn't speak English, who knew the words to every single Michael Jackson song, even if they didn't speak English. Like they just knew the sounds,
Exactly.
And like language is sonic, language is sounds. And it's interesting. Like, I mean, I'm a huge Bad Bunny fan. I know we have, there's many debates around Bad Bunny right now, but like there's growing up in America with like Latin artists like J-Lo and Enrique Iglesias and like folks who were Ricky Martin doing like the crossovers, like you have to. And Selena, I remember like when she had an English song, it was like, you have to do an English song. That's like a very specific thing. And the idea of like someone like Bad Bunny being like, not even gonna even think about doing, that's very powerful. But it's like there's power in all of these choices. And so I think I was just curious about that, because I think there's probably many ways that you can articulate, and that's one of them.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was like, I love a lot of songs that are in English. And for me, it was that thing of like, you have to in the beginning. And I was like, no, I don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't have to at all. And I did multiple albums without ever doing that. And then I reached a certain point where I was just like, okay, am I now though censoring myself?
Yeah. Then what are we doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I was just like, we're gonna have a cute 2 songs.
Yeah,
and they're songs from my heart. Like they're songs that I wrote like as a reflection to a moment, So.
And it is a way also to, like, if you have this diaspora audience, you have a very multicultural audience, of having a moment of some common kind of understanding in a more like in a linguistic way, where maybe if someone is like, I want to sing along or something, like there is something about that I think in terms of building solidarity, we are using this language to build solidarity
100%,
like, and to understand each other's interconnected struggles. And this is something that I think is so crucially important, and something that music has always had the power to do, to sort of highlight, I hate the word universal. That's why I like to think like interconnected, overlapping struggles. Like this is, it's not that everything that music of course has a universality, but I think there's all the difference that lives in it. It's like I am to embrace all of that and all of the different struggle. And I think right now, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast is to show, okay, yes, you're Sudanese, and I've had guests who are Palestinian, who are Irish, who are, different guests. And we see these through lines and these interconnections of like how, not just in struggle, like not like, and that's the thing that it's hard, because sometimes the focus of the interconnection is the struggle and the suffering. They have done this to us, the colonizers, the capitalists, and it's same with like my solidarity with like a white worker, is to say it's like through suffering always. But there are all these other ways, and music, I think, is one of those really joyous ways to find solidarity with each other.
I agree.
And I guess like one of the things, and this is, we met because we were doing a panel with Huda Asfour in December 2023, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was the time.
Yeah. And, like very like, obviously Huda is Palestinian, you're Sudanese, and you're American. I'm Indian American first generation. Like then we all have our different sort of experiences of of music, of being organized. You're collaborators, you and Huda, right? Do you have an album together as well?
We have one song together, but we have a collection of body of work that we have performed in multiple places before.
Yeah. I guess like for me, something I'm wondering more generally is what is our role right now, especially when solidarity is so necessary, so important. There's so many, I mean, by design, there are so many things happening in so many different places, dire, horrific things, you know, like in a way that I don't know how you can quantify. It's like, is it worse here or is it worse here? Or, you know, who is in more need, like this person or this person? Like, it's so horrific, like to say, yeah, someone sitting in an ICE detention center, like a family for however many months that the family was in that family detention center. There, like, is that suffering somehow less than an Iranian person getting bombed or whatever? And I think that's why looking at these things individually, I mean, it's making less and less sense, right? I guess, what do you feel like your role is as a musician in terms of like maybe helping to kind of cultivate this solidarity? And also maybe if like there are even something I also want to try to leave listeners with as much as possible is like, you care if you want to, if you're learning about these issues for the first time, you're learning about Sudan or just learning more about what's happening, what should we be doing? Like, what are the kinds of things we could do, especially with this idea of all these overlaps in mind? Like, how do we focus our energy? So I guess one part of the question is, how are you moving in this time? Where are you focusing your energy, like in what you feel your role can be in this moment? And maybe we can also just like extemporaneously think about what a listener might be able to get involved with or do at this moment, you know?
Focus your rage. Focus your rage on the people doing the damage are few.
Yes.
The people suffering are many.
Yes.
Focus your rage. That's my advice. If you want to learn about Sudan, you can follow any of the hashtags. Keep eyes on Sudan, Free Sudan. I'm a co-founder of a mutual aid initiative called Sanduga Sudan, where we donate money directly to people doing mutual aid work inside Sudan on the ground that are non-NGOs.
Yeah, that's like the only way at this point, right?
Exactly. And we've been doing that for the last couple of years. There's a lot of other people you can follow to learn more information. BS on Blast is a great source for this. Yasmin Abdelmajid, there's a lot of people out there. If you want just information, if you want to donate, lots of places to also donate to, but you can find lists of people. Sanduga Sudan, we send 100% of everything directly on the ground. We're all volunteer run.
Yeah.
Small team. So we don't have a big presence online and any of that jazz. But for me, ultimately, it's like my job as a musician is to create the room that we can come in together.
Yeah. Which is no small thing.
It's not a small thing, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Music is what I love about music as a self-proclaimed introvert, by the way. As in like an introvert and who can act like an extrovert because I know how to act, but fundamentally is an introvert. Music is a fundamentally social act.
Yeah, it can kind of be this private universe that you have, but inherently it moves into that social space.
Exactly, it's fundamentally out there. And what I love about the fact that I work with instrumentalists is the fact that I have to be with people to make music.
Yes, yeah.
I have to be with people to make music. It's just, that's the way it is. And then we have to make that music in a room where other people are present to hear said music.
Yes, exactly.
Otherwise, we're just playing around in my living room.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Yeah. But even that is a social act. Like,
totally.
You have neighbors. You have,
totally. I have my neighbors can come by. People can come down. Like, you know, we hang out. We're eating. We're snacking. We're drinking. It's a good time.
Yeah.
But for me, yeah, it's about that. My job is to create the rooms where different people can come and talk to each other about what's going on with them. And hopefully I can encourage you to be more angry.
Yeah. Direct the rage. Help.
Yes. I would like to funnel and direct the rage. That's all I want to do. I just want you to channel that rage, honey.
At the correct
people. There's very few of them. There's really not that many of them. Like
we can start to count them on our hands, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't take a lot of research. I'm not going to say them out loud so you don't get like shadow banned or something.
I don't care. I think I think in one podcast, especially with Greg Saunier of Deerhoof, it was the day that Deerhoof left Spotify, and I think we named every oligarch.
Man, fuck Spotify.
Yeah. But I think on that episode, we named every single oligarch by name, the big ones, and every company, and I was like, okay, this podcast is kind of doomed.
He's officially never getting sponsored again.
And it's not on Spotify. This podcast is not on Spotify. So,
I like that. I support that.
Yeah, I think like the other kind of material things that come to mind for me is like, we see, there are strategies that have been cultivated, and certainly we know this from the BDS movement in Palestine, of like, and obviously connections to the civil rights movement in America or the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, like boycott being a very important tool. And, the UAE is a boycott target. And there are resources. I'll try to like kind of compile in the show notes like some information about like UAE boycott. Just putting pressure. It's like in the same way that I think people are becoming more aware of the companies that are working with ICE, like Home Depot or Target, or like that are literally letting ICE like come into their stores to take their own employees. Like I think this idea of using kind of cross movement strategies and understanding that some of them are, it's like the very same exact people, right? Like the companies doing extraction in Sudan, and like Israel has so much investment all over Africa, all over Latin America.
And Israel is literally doing the PR work for the RSF.
There you go.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah, so they're connected.
Saudi Arabia is funding SAF and getting a huge cut of gold now too. So it's not just the UAE. I do want to focus on the UAE as a boycott target. Yeah. But I feel like that makes RSF be the bad guy and SAF is the good guy.
And that's not that binary.
It's not that. SAF is not a good guy. Okay. SAF and RSF are the same guy who are in a fight.
Yeah. And the person the people are suffering.
And the people are suffering on the ground. But they're in a fight over the same kind of golden money with these other people. So for me, I'm just like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Russia, Egypt, the United States really fundamentally. Yeah. But we can't technically boycott them because we live here.
We're thinking I'm thinking about, there's internal stuff like striking, like tax strikes, general strikes. I know these things are really difficult to organize, but these are going to be multi-year processes. But I do have this sensation that people are starting to awaken more and are starting to connect the dots. But I do think this is one of the things that we can help do is connect the dots more.
Absolutely. And I want to encourage everyone to boycott, but like while also acknowledging that there's a huge Sudani diaspora in all these places. Yeah. And you do what you got to do, man. Like I'm here,
Yeah. It's not, none of this is
black and white. None of this is black and white or simple. And I want to advocate for boycotts and how we spend our money. Really, very much I advocate for that, but also advocate for understanding the spectrum of how people are forcibly removed and moved.
Yeah, and then, I think corporations as boycott targets is much more clear.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Because they operate in such a cross-border way. So something like Palantir, obviously Apple, this is on Apple Podcasts, and I'm trying to figure out what are alternative mechanisms, but we want people to listen, as many people as possible. Yeah. But of course, Apple has a huge hand a huge hand in what's happening in Sudan and Congo and so many places. And so companies, I think, and I've just started migrating away from Google. It's like I'm still in between. I'm still have Docs and Google Maps, but I'm like really trying to get, like, I don't have Gmail anymore. I don't use the browser anymore. I don't know. It feels, for me at least, like I have a choice. I have a right to refuse, right? And how are those ways we can exercise like the very little, sometimes agents, like our political power? I think we find like, okay, voting is like, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, but we are starting to see especially in a time and in a place where democracy if it ever existed, I think is really on its like last leg, you know, of the octopi or whatever, of the spider. It's like really, really on the last leg. And so these are some of those ways. And then I would say in the same way of like where to put your resources, of where you want to invest things, like buying people's music who you like buying Alsarah's record, buying like directly from Bandcamp or directly at a show. These are other ways that we can like continue to kind of build. In a way, we're just like trading resources amongst each other.
100%. Honestly, 100%.
You know, like we had a Gaza benefit last night at People's Forum, and it's like, I'm just like, we're just circulating over and over again our resources amongst each other. But that is like the definition of mutual aid, and that's kind of where we're at. Yeah,
that is the definition of mutual aid. You know, in 2008, when the economy crashed, the Somali economy inside Ohio, the community, because it's such a deep community in Ohio, it took the economic crash a full year and a half later to reach them.
Wow.
Because the dollar circulated so much inside the community.
Wow. Interesting. That is very interesting. I mean, this is what it's going to come down to, because oligarchs, like, they are building their bunkers and they are placing their bets,
totally.
And they're
not interested
intergalactic
in us.
Exploration.
Absolutely. They're gonna throw us on fire, under the bus, under this, like, the rug, any day, every day.
So it's up to us, like, to take care of us. I think, like, I could probably talk to you for 4 more hours, but we're gonna be mindful of time. But one of the things that I think you said, and that you said probably in many different places, is this idea of like, so maybe somebody looks at you, you're a refugee, it's a particular identity, or, you know, it's a particular struggle. But you have talked about this idea of like how this is the kind of future normal, this idea of like the refugee identity of being kind of fundamentally where we are going. And maybe this also relates to like kind of this mix of diaspora people like meeting in these different ways in these different places. I'm just kind of curious, like if you can kind of tease that out a little bit for people, because I think for me to hear that was a very like powerful kind of concept, and it does make me feel like less like, oh, I am a citizen of America and I live here and I have this, and like the distance that we can create between ourselves and someone who is a refugee, or like the sign a business can put up that says the refugees are welcome here. It's like still this distance. So could you kind of explain what you mean by that, the future normal?
Well,
you're not the exception.
I'm not. I mean, because what used to be okay, so first of all, being a refugee is not a permanent identity. It is a paperwork status that ends up fucking up your life.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
To be very frank. Like it stops your life for many years. Hopefully not too many if you're lucky and you have resources and money. But your class status really marks and denotes how quickly that space changes. However, the way people treat you after it. For me, at the time that I came to the United States, it felt like I was one of the few, one of the only ones. Because at that time there was not, even though there was a lot of other refugees, but there was not as many Sudani refugees at the time. And it made me feel like the way I was being treated in the beginning, which is why for a long time I was kind of hesitant about even talking about it out loud, It made me feel like it was something that was like a mark, almost like having a birthmark on your face or something. And I started to watch everyone moving for like so many people coming and seeking refuge for climate reasons, for political reasons, economic reasons, violent reasons. And I knew, even back then I was like, I know that this is going to happen to everybody. And all of you are ignoring the signs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're living in a world where, like, we're running out of water in 13 years.
Yeah, period.
Like, like, there keeps to be, like, catastrophes. Hurricane Sandy?
Yeah.
New York could have been a refugee zone.
Yeah, and that was already like 2012. I mean, we're probably gonna experience something worse. Like,
and I saw New York turn into a refugee zone then.
Yeah, people just like displacing within the city.
Within the city, people lining up for gasoline. Parts of the city completely neglected. People needing to send water down to people.
This neighborhood, Red Hook, was one of those very affected neighborhoods. I lived on the other side of the BQE, just over here, kind of, they call it Carroll Gardens, which is like right on the border.
Yeah.
And would come because the Red Hook houses, which is the housing projects here, are the biggest housing projects in New York City. And yeah, like no elevator service, no electricity, like people's food going bad, like elderly people not getting medicine.
Yep.
And it was like, it's gonna be worse than that next time for sure.
Exactly. And this happened here.
Yeah.
Where you think you have infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we are watching the world literally just get decimated. And we're watching the United States and Europe decimate the rest of the world.
And internally to their own
exactly, and to their own people. So I was like,
populations.
I'm not sure what you think the end result of this is going to be, except more displacement.
Yeah.
And for me, when I said I'm the future normal, I really meant it. I was like, you're going to see more and more people who have this tension around survival, around growing, around the idea of longevity, around the idea of what is safety. It's just an illusion.
Yeah. But I think it's beautiful to see an example of someone like you who, these aren't things that you necessarily like would have chosen if they unfolded this way, but the way that you have, it's not just survival what you're doing. Like from my perspective and from hearing your music and hearing your story, it's much more than survival. It's like you have found these beautiful ways to exist and also to affirm the existence of other people and build the solidarity and create community between people. And like that, if we're all moving in this direction, you're someone we can look to as a model of like, how do we do this, and we don't know at what time, what moment these things can happen, right?
We don't.
And this is another way I think we can have solidarity, is like, we are all in this state of transition. It's so, I mean, I've never experienced like a time like that. None of us, I think, since we have been alive, and we're not far apart in age, but I think like it's like every day feels like, oh, this has never happened before. This has never happened before. So I think getting used to that idea of like, yeah, and that can connect us actually. So
yeah, that means that we are in community now.
Yes.
We're in culture. We are culture.
Yes.
Because culture is made up and we get to make it up every day. I'm reading Audre Lorde's her biography that's written by Alexis Gums. And first of all, beautiful book. Highly recommend.
Okay.
But in the beginning, there's a beautiful line where, she says, fear is a space without an exit visa.
Ooh, that's a bar right there.
Right? Right. And I was just like, oh my God. And that's why, for me, fundamentally, the ultimate violence of banning people from traveling, there's no violence like that.
Yeah.
To let someone not be able to leave when they need survival, that's demonic work.
Yeah.
God, I wish you well in the afterlife.
Yeah, there's so much of that happening right now.
Exactly. And so, and Audre Lorde also, like, reading it reminds me that, she grew up between World War I and World War II. She was shaped by both of those worlds. And so she was shaped by war. There's other people, generations before us, who wrote powerful books and powerful liturgy, like, that we came up in. Like, her poems shaped my youth. Rereading them now in this space of suffering also, and of glowing and growing and thriving, because that's also what we do in this painful change. It's about growing, and change is always messy.
Yeah, it's not. There's a discomfort in growth. There's
Absolutely.
like no other way around it.
One of my favorite musicians and teachers, Toshi Regan.
Yes.
She likes to say, "Good news is not always fun news," and I take that to heart because she's right.
It's so true. Yeah. I mean, and these elders, like, there are folks who have laid a groundwork. And there's somewhat of a map. It's up to us to continue to build on that and to continue to. I mean, there are things that maybe, like, I think about Octavia Butler, and people asked her, like, how are you so prescient? Like, how did you know? She's like, just extrapolating from, like, in the Reagan era, just like, I'm just imagining, okay, if these things play out, this is what's going to happen. It's not even like my imagination being that I'm so creative,
Exactly. It's like, I'm just explaining to you what's happening to you.
Yeah. But so we have these things, and I think we are all collectively kind of, this is part of what we're doing in these conversations, is sharing strategy and trying to put all these pieces together, because it's very urgent. Like, we don't have time to wait on these things. And every piece of this, like, whether it's we're singing on stage and talking to audiences, or having these conversations outside of that, or in a classroom, if you're talking to students, or whatever it is, like, for all of us, or if you're just on the bus and you're, like, talking to somebody, like, there are so many points at which we can continue to do this work. And so thank you for being part of my work and sort of enabling me to, like, have this particular conversation on this episode of this podcast. It's really, I was so excited to talk to you. I'm so glad we made it happen. And yeah, where can people find your music? And of course, they're going to hear some of it after we conclude now. But yeah, where can people find you?
You can find me in all the usual evil places. Spotify, Apple, YouTube. I prefer YouTube because it's got more fun things on it. So you can go down a better rabbit hole. Yeah. Bandcamp is my favorite place to listen to us. You can listen to us at Bandcamp, Alsarah and the Nubatones.
Yeah. We're going to promote Bandcamp, and we'll put a link to the Bandcamp.
Yes, we're promoting Bandcamp.
Also, like, it's not to promote a company, but I haven't used Spotify since 2018 just because I never really liked the platform.
Don't have an account.
Yeah, and I got my music off there last year, kind of because of a conversation I had with Greg from Deerhoof here about it, and it was like, oh, it's time. Like, why are we still doing this? Qobuz is an interesting kind of new streamer.
Yeah, I've been looking at that. Huda actually sent me a link to it.
Yeah, and it's digital quality. You're probably already on there, but I'll double check after this. But yeah, it's we have alternatives, but let's say Bandcamp is the best place to go for
it. And
go to a show. Do you have any shows coming up?
Nothing. We just finished a tour, so nothing right now, but nothing in the States right now. We're going to be in Berlin in April, but, like, come to Berlin.
If you're in Berlin, we may have a listener in Berlin.
Come to us.
Yes, but yeah,
April 24th in Berlin at the Arab Film Festival.
Oh, great. Yeah, and this will come out before then, so that's great. But thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
I loved this conversation. Thank you for being you.
Thank you. Well, that was my conversation with the absolutely effervescent and brilliant Alsarah. You can check out Alsarah's music on Bandcamp, Alsarah and the Nubatones. And if you liked this conversation, you want to hear more conversations like this on music and liberation and activism, please subscribe and follow on Substack at Amrita Kidambi. You can also see on Substack the various incentives we're offering if you decide that you want to support this podcast monetarily. It is all self-funded, and it's just me and my producer, Z Park. I engineer this myself. This was recorded live at Pioneer Works in Brooklyn. And as always, I'm going to play you out with a track from Alsarah. And this song is called Men Ana from Seasons of the Road, her album, which you can find on Bandcamp. Like, follow, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. As always, solidarity, and until next time.
من أنا لو ما حبيتك واستنيتك من أنا لو ما هتفت في سبيلك رجلي داق الدرب في مسيرك من أنا كتمت وكان في لحظة سكون قبل الهبوب وانا واقفة مستنياك عمال اقول من انا صدى السؤال زي الرعد يدق من جبل لجبل يقول ليك لما التراب يغطي المدن والزمن يلف مبارح وبكرة في ايده ويسيبك واقف براك بتسأل نفس السؤال ردك حيكون الفرق يسيول الشوق